This session will be recorded and available to you on my Beckett, so not my Beckett even, on my hub after the event on the Beyond Beckett pages. So today's theme is clarity, and this session is about where to look for graduate jobs, because what we find in the careers team is it's one of the big issues that graduates struggle with. You can often say, can't we, Georgie, we say to students, and where have you been looking? And they say, oh, I've just been Googling it, or I've just been looking on Indeed. And it's not necessarily the right place, but obviously it depends on what area of work you're looking for, where you're going to be looking for jobs. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. You've all muted yourself, I think. And you've turned off your camera. Please feel free to post questions, and Georgina will be looking in the chat function, or use the raise your hand function if you want to ask a question as we go along. And please do ask questions, makes it a bit more interesting for us. If it helps, you can use the caption function, where you get the words that I'm speaking will come out as captions by using the three dots in the middle there that you can see. So in terms of what we'll be covering in this session, we're going to be looking at where you find advertised opportunities, and also the importance of looking for hidden job opportunities, because they reckon that a really high percentage, the percentage differs, but a lot of jobs are actually never become advertised. You just find them through your network or by making what we call speculative approaches to employers. So it's important that we talk to you about that option as well. We'll be thinking about some of the key places to look for graduate jobs, the key sites, and also what to do if you need help after this session in terms of job seeking, and who can help and support you going forward. So if you wouldn't mind just telling me if you're a 1 or a 2 or a 3 in the chat function, please. Where are you at the moment? So if you can just post, if you're a number 1, you decided and you're applying. If you're a number 2, you've decided but you've not actually made any applications, or maybe you're not sure what to do next. Thanks, Francesca. Grace, brilliant.
1 of each.
Ah, that's good. 1 of each. Very good. Excellent. Okay. So whatever stage you're at, hopefully this session will kind of give you a bit of a steer and a bit of clarity in terms of what to do next. But do remember, if you're not sure, Mahmood, you can come and seek help from us in the careers team in terms of helping you to clarify what the next best steps are for you individually. You may be in this position. So if you have started applying, I won't single you out, Francesca, but if you have started applying, it could be that you've had some applications that weren't successful. It's important to see that these applications, to learn from them, to reflect, seek feedback. Not all employers will give you feedback. But if you reflect on you're not getting past the kind of written application stage, it could potentially be an issue with the way that you're presenting your CV, for example, and that some help and advice can kind of put that right for you. Think about if you're getting through to interviews and that's where you're stumbling, or possibly even to assessment centres, but that's kind of a bit strange at the moment, isn't it, if they're going online. But yeah, do think about it's not a failure, it's an opportunity to learn and to grow and to reflect on where things are going wrong and seek advice in terms of how you can put things right. Because it often can be quite simple things that, things like interview practice can help you get through that stage of the process. So in terms of employment, graduate employment, hopefully we're going to shift you through from the guy with his head in the hands to the young lady going the 3 main options and smiling and thinking, yeah, I know what my options are. So we're just focusing in this session on employment options. The first option is a graduate program. I'm sure you will have heard of graduate programs. Can I have a yes in the chat box if you've heard of graduate programs, graduate schemes? Just let us know. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Around about 10% of students go on to this nationally, so they're very sought after, and there's a lot of competition to get into a graduate program or a graduate scheme. Typically, they tend to be fixed in length, so around about 18 months to 2 years, and you get a range of experience. So, for example, if you went to a bank, you might spend some time in, say, the marketing department, you might go into retail banking, you might go into a project management role, and then at the end of your kind of rotations, after the 2 years, you would probably sit down with a line manager and say, I particularly enjoyed my placement in HR. I would like to look at the possibility of progressing my career within that area. So that's typically kind of how it tends to work. And also you would have things like professional development that sits alongside it. I know, Georgina, with things like the Leeds City Council graduate programme, do you want to say a bit about the professional development that you can undertake with that programme?
Yeah, so with the Leeds City Council, the graduates on there do an MBA. They actually do it at Leeds Beckett, so they get a fully funded kind of bespoke MBA, and they have a mentor, a buddy, a line manager, and a health and wellbeing manager. So and I think that's quite typical of graduate programs, in that you are quite well looked after in terms of development and you know, being mentored through, really. But as Fran said, they are difficult to come by because they are so competitive. They tend to be the things that everyone's heard of and applies for first.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of any examples that you can put in the chat box for us? So we've mentioned Leeds City Council, we've mentioned banks, things like HSBC, Barclays. Any others that you've come across that are popular in the student community that you've applied for or your friends have talked about? I think we need to do a new participant list, Georgina. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Can you do that? Or
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so Francesca's put down there things like Teach First, Civil Service, Fast Track, NHS Management Scheme. Well done, brilliant. You're stealing our thunder, you see, because here we go. Here's some examples. Yep, so you mentioned a few of those. We've also got things like the big accounting and consulting firms like PwC, KPMG, and Google, Amazon, that sort of thing. They all offer fairly substantial grad programs. The other thing, obviously, we didn't mention with grad programs is it tends to take a large number. So it could potentially be 100 students into the HSBC grad program. And the other thing to mention is that some of them are very specialist graduate programs. Although some are rotational and you experience different aspects of a business, there are some that are, for example, tech-based grad programs or finance-based grad programs. So you do have to look quite carefully at what you're applying for. Okay, so where will you find these graduate programs? We hope that you recognise some of these places to look, the typical things like prospects.ac.uk, target jobs. You mentioned the NHS management scheme, they look on NHS jobs. The other thing to bear in mind is that some professional bodies, that was the most dodgy picture I could find there of white middle-aged men at the top, professional bodies. I couldn't find one that was a bit better than that, but professional bodies. So for example, if you're thinking of going into a finance role, if you look on like the ICAEW, which is the Professional Chartered Accountancy, one of the professional chartered accountancy bodies, they have a jobs board. So depending on what area you're thinking of, it's worth checking out the professional association or professional body associated with that area, and checking out if they do offer a job seeking function on their website, job board. Hopefully that makes sense. And anything else you want to add there, Georgina? Anything else you can think of that?
The only other thing is, I suppose, because I work so much with social sciences and health students, there's a kind of another genre of them almost. So if you go back to the previous slide where you mentioned teach first, so that obviously that qualifies you to be a teacher, but then there's others like Police Now, Unlocked, which is the prison officer. There's probation schemes, there's youth custody schemes, and there's also a couple that qualify you to be a social worker. So there's Frontline, which qualifies you to be a children's social worker, and Think Ahead, which qualifies you to be a mental health adult social worker. So they're not all corporate. Some of them, you know, can be for third sector roles as well. And they are growing. That, you know, the government is putting money into those. It's quite interesting to know about those as well.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that's the graduate program or graduate job. The other aspect of looking for graduate jobs is with a small or medium-sized employer. Typically, it wouldn't be called a graduate program or a graduate scheme, because you'll be recruited into a specific role. So, for example, into a trainee accountant role, let's say, or it might be, can you think of any of the examples, Georgina, from the social sciences?
Well, I suppose, yeah, just things like support worker, mental health support worker, trainee, digital marketing apprentice, you know, things like that, that kind of name,
Yeah, so these are specific jobs rather than a program where you rotate around the different aspects and functions of a business. So what's different about that is that you probably, you know, some students argue that they actually prefer this because you get to know more about a business. You may be able to influence the business. You might be working with the person who owns that business. So it's just a different take on a graduate role, but still valid. It's a graduate job. It's highly skilled employment normally, and it's just with a smaller organisation that probably doesn't have a big HR department to recruit into, you know, many students into a graduate scheme. Flexibility, that's one of the bonuses of a graduate job with an SME. You're working at your own pace. So in terms of personal development, it depends on the organisation's focus. They may allow you to do a professional qualification. They may allow you to have time off to go back to uni and do this. Some of them will actually support you. So in a graduate program or a grad scheme, they're going to pay for that for you to do the professional qualification. Whereas in an SME, wouldn't necessarily pay for it. Some will, but they are usually quite flexible in terms of allowing you some space and time to actually take that qualification, maybe have the time off, finish early one day so you can go to uni to do a night class, or maybe not this time around. So the focus does vary. It's quite different depending on which company or which job role you're going into. And we'd find a lot of these kind of graduate jobs within the digital sector, as Georgina mentioned, and IT roles. Because Leeds has a focus on the digital sector. There's many up and coming small businesses that are looking to recruit both tech focused students and non-tech students. So graduate jobs with an SME is the second option. And then Georgina mentioned about careers like things like social work. For certain careers, you will be required to get some experience potentially before you can get into a graduate level role. Do you want to say a little bit more there, Georgina, about kind of getting in a kind of lower level to get the experience?
Yeah, I think I've noticed a couple of you have got kind of psychology backgrounds. So say, for example, if you wanted to go along that psychology route or working in mental health, then very often you'd have to start off with being a mental health support worker or a similar role, and then building up for that. Sometimes even before you can go on to the next stage of training and qualifications. That would be the same for social work. So even if you were applying for a master's in social work, so not even a graduate scheme, you would need experience of working with people with challenging behaviours, vulnerable people, that kind of thing. So very often, I think people who are just about to graduate can be surprised that they're not going straight into a graduate job, that they might actually have to, get a much lower level job just to work up, and that's quite normal.
Yeah. And it applies to lots of different areas, doesn't it? So, for example, in the legal sector, you might go into a paralegal role to get experience. Marketing, you might go into a marketing assistant role. HR will be the same. There's not many HR grad schemes, so it's quite common for people to go in, say, as a HR assistant, get experience, and then once you've got a year or two under your belt, you can then go back and apply for those grad schemes. Or potentially the company will recognise your worth and might put you through professional qualifications, and you progress within the company that way. So, as Georgina says, it's not uncommon for graduates to be in a job that is a kind of what we call direct entry level job, and then to try and work up from that position. And don't dismiss this, because it's a great way to get experience. And if you find that the employer's not being supportive and you're not progressing, then you've got the experience under your belt to kind of move on and go somewhere else, or do your master's qualification, whatever you decide to go on to do after that. So you're not going to look for those direct entry jobs or jobs with small and medium-sized firms on prospects, probably, or on target jobs. You're more likely to find those vacancies advertised on MyHub, on our sites. They're both two links to sites within the uni. So that would be SMEs contacting the uni often and saying, please will you advertise this vacancy to your students. Remember that if you are thinking about working for a specific company, you can look on their own website for vacancies. Some organisations, some small businesses will only advertise their vacancies there, because quite often if they use things like job boards, there's a cost. So you might have to hunt around on their own websites. And it's not that intuitive sometimes, is it, Georgina, when you're looking for jobs on these websites? So you've got to kind of look, work for us or careers or recruitment. You do have to hunt around often. It can often be under the things like about us section of a company website. So do a bit of digging. You usually will find them advertising their own vacancies on their own websites. Your own network is really important as well. So if you have a job goal in mind, think about anybody or any organisations that you've had contact with that potentially could offer opportunities, because it's this thing about opportunities are connected to people. So it's a really good idea to sit down and kind of map out who can potentially help you within your own network and supply you with those opportunities. Want to add anything there, Georgina?
No, I think you're going to talk a bit about social media, aren't you? I was going to say small organisations, although they don't want to pay to put their vacancies on there, they might just put it on their social media. If they've got a vacancy, or they'll ask around. They'll ask their own employees for recommendations.
Yeah. So that brings it back to the networking thing. If you know somebody who works at an organisation, or a friend of a friend, or a family friend, it's always worth telling them that you're actually looking for a job in a particular area. So if they hear of anything, they'll let you know. And some firms do kind of bonuses, don't they? If you recruit a mate, then they'll give you a 50 quid M&S voucher, something like that. So it's a win-win on both sides. So here we've got job boards. So these smaller organisations will often be using things like Indeed or Total Jobs. They might be advertising on the gov.uk jobs website, because it's free. So don't dismiss things like that. It's definitely worth looking. And I guess the crucial thing is if you put junk in, you get junk out. So think about what you're searching for in terms of jobs. Sometimes if you put in the word trainee or graduate, that will help your search, rather than something like therapist. If you put in trainee, then you might get more results coming through. So do remember that you can sign up for job alerts on these job boards, and that means that it saves you a lot of I'm going to check in every week. If you've got it set up properly to receive job alerts, then they will be fed through to you depending on frequency that you select. Sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming if you're getting them every day, so it might be worth saying, I'm just going to sign up and get the alerts once a week, and then you agree mentally that once a week you're going to go through the adverts properly and see if there's anything that you want to apply for. You can upload your CV, but we would always say one of the reasons that graduates get rejected is that they don't tailor their approach enough. So it's very, very easy to upload a CV, and sometimes students will say, well, I don't know where I'm going wrong because I've applied for 40 jobs this week. Goodness me, how did you manage that? Well, I just pressed a button and it applied for 40 jobs. And of course, that's unlikely to be successful if you do it that way. So you do have to make sure that you are changing your CV. So if you've uploaded it and you've got a scattergun approach of you're wanting to apply for jobs in lots of different sectors, then that's probably going to be difficult for you. It's better to be sort of selective and targeted and make sure your CV is tailored to those roles that you want to go for. There are one or two specialist jobs boards. That's not exhaustive. You can see there, if you're an international student, things like Student Circus might be worth having a look at. And there are some job boards where employers are specifically interested in recruiting, for example, disabled students or students from a BAME background. So it's worth looking out those specialist boards as well. Not sure what happened there. It skipped along to Sorry, let me just go back to the slide that I was. Okay, so recruitment agencies, again, an interesting one. Some students find them very useful. There are some agencies that will only deal with experienced staff. So they will say, we can't deal with you because you haven't got 6 months experience, for example. But we do get good feedback from things like Brook Street, Reed, Page Personnel for general vacancies and being helpful to students. There's a couple of specific ones there for students or graduates. Probably the best thing is if you look at Agency Central, to get a feel for recruiters within the sector that you want to go into. So you can tailor your kind of approaches to recruiters that deal with the jobs that you're interested in getting into. And there's no harm in basically approaching them. They operate in a similar way to jobs boards in that you can just upload your CV, but you're more likely to get a positive result if you kind of make contact with them, maybe have a phone conversation with them about how they can help, whether they do deal with new graduates, and what's the best way to present yourself. And they will often give advice on things like CVs and interview techniques as well, because it's in their interest to place you in a job, because obviously their income is based on placing people into employment, and then they get a fee from an employer for doing that. Some agencies specialise in temporary placements, temporary opportunities, but again, don't dismiss that, because it's something, an opportunity to get information on your CV and get some experience under your belt to then go forward in the future if you want to go for the kind of grad programs, etc., to enhance your CV to an employer as well. And anything to say about recruiters, Georgina, that you've found useful? Or
I think agency central is really useful for finding the specialist agency. Have you got an echo there on me? So I can hear an echo. And the other thing I would just kind of confirm what Fran said about the scattergun approach. The same applies with recruitment agencies. Quality rather than quantity. So maybe just use one or two, but get to know them, go in, meet them, so they understand what you want. Give them a call a couple of times a week. Make sure that you're at the top of their list, rather than just sending your CV to 50 different agencies. So yeah, be really targeted and specific.
Thank you. Okay, the other thing to remember is that LinkedIn operates in some ways like a jobs board. So you can use the search function and you can subscribe to job alerts. You can also, if you're following organisations or companies, professional bodies that you're interested in that sector or that company and the opportunities they offer, you will often hear about what's kind of happening with them in advance of them posting opportunities on a jobs board. So it's definitely worth following those organisations and those professional bodies as well. And they will be advertising internships, graduate jobs, etc. on the student portal. So just a few tips there in terms of LinkedIn, because if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you really are going to be missing out these days, because just as much as LinkedIn is a source of vacancies, recruiters and employers are actually looking for people that potentially they want to approach with opportunities as well. So it's really important that you have a profile and that you have an effective profile on LinkedIn. We mentioned a second ago about using social media to find jobs. I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but some employers do use things like Instagram and Twitter to post vacancies. There's a link to an article there on the slides that we'll be posting the slides and the recording in the Beckett, the Beyond Beckett page after the session. And anything else, Georgina, you want to add there about social media and job search?
Just to kind of reaffirm about LinkedIn, actually, that you can adjust your settings so that it's obvious that you're open to jobs. And I'm hearing from more and more students and graduates that they're being approached directly by employers. So if you think about it from their point of view, it's much cheaper and quicker to go and find 10 candidates and offer them an interview, rather than, advertise a job, have to read all the applications and then shortlist. They are just going directly. So it is really worth having a look at LinkedIn if you're not on there.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks. So we said at the beginning we wanted to talk to you about the hidden job market. So remembering that LinkedIn is also a networking tool. So we said about connecting with organisations and companies and individuals who, anyone you've worked with or studied with, who they will have their own network as well, and they can potentially introduce you to their connections as well. So a good tip is look at somebody who is working in a company that you're interested in working for and look at their profile, look at their career journey. How long did it take them to get to where they want to be? So, you might be quite surprised that it doesn't often happen immediately, and a lot of careers are not linear. It's not kind of directly out of uni and into the job that you want. People are often applying for things like graduate jobs and graduate schemes, maybe 3-4 years after they finish university, and there's nothing wrong with that. I did a session earlier with an academic who said it took him nigh on 10 years to get into the job that he was eventually found his niche into. So it does take a while for some people to get there. But it's good to look at LinkedIn and see other people's journeys, the people that you want to emulate. How can you build other connections? Well, in the past, we would say go to employer events on campus. They're now virtual. We are still offering employer events and activities both this week and Tomorrow there's an event on accounts and finance careers, among other events. Just plug my own event there tomorrow. But there are employer events that will continue to happen online or virtually going forward. There will be things like law in practice, business in practice, events that are happening in your own school areas. Look at Eventbrite for local networking opportunities. So, for example, in the digital sector, you'll see things like hackathons, meetups, all ways to develop your contacts, develop that network, and remembering people connect to opportunities, and opportunities are connected with people. So, you know, who do you know that could help you? And if you don't know anybody, you're going to have to get in place some way of making those connections by undertaking those networking activities. So the final thing to draw your attention in terms of where to look for graduate jobs, these jobs are, this is the idea here, is where an employer is not advertising a vacancy, but let's imagine, as Georgina said, they're reaching out. What's cheaper for them is if, let's say, your CV lands on their desk at a time they're thinking, yes, we might potentially want to recruit somebody. It saves them a lot of hassle and a lot of expense of going, for example, to a recruiter to do that if you're approaching them direct. And students will sometimes feedback, you know, I've tried it, it didn't work. The key really is you've got to be lucky. That's the reality. But potentially, if you have a very, very well crafted CV and cover letter, an employer might come back to you and say, goodness me, I was really impressed, Grace or Francesca or Mahmood, with what you sent through. We don't have anything at the moment, but I'm certainly going to keep you on file and get in touch with me in a couple of months to see if something's changed. So you do have to tailor what you send through to them. It can't just be a scattergun approach. The same CV you sent to 30 employers, they will see through it. But if you've looked at a job description within their organisation and you've crafted your CV and your letter based on the skills they're looking for, you've used their keywords, then you've got much more chance that this will be a successful approach to your job seeking activities.
And can I just add something to that? One of my sons made, I don't know, 40 to 50 speculative approaches to get a placement year in marketing, and he did finally get one. And I think one of the key things about speculative approaches is to follow it up. So if you send an email or even post, you know, stand out in the crowd, send a letter by post, follow it up a few days later, because that always creates a good impression and makes you look really motivated.
And it gives you an opportunity, if you get somebody on the phone, you can actually sell yourself a little bit more. So important to prepare for that follow-up call in terms of what you can offer and why you're contacting them, make it very professional. Yeah. But that gives you an idea of volume, doesn't it? If you had to send 40 and follow all those up, it's getting a job is a job in itself, they used to say, and it still applies, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you need resilience as well as luck.
Yeah.
The
other thing we wanted to highlight to you is the fact that many graduate employers accept graduates regardless of your degree discipline. So sometimes graduates fall into the trap of thinking, oh, well, I have to look for jobs just in the area that relates to my degree. And that's just simply not true. And that applies across the board, including in things like the tech sector, business sector. You know, you can do things like conversion programs. Some employers, the vast majority of graduate employers, are prepared to recruit students and train them in the area that they're recruiting into. So what they'd be really interested in is your, what we call transferable skills or your employability skills. Things like your ability to work in a team, ability to work in a team, ability to communicate, solve problems, etc. And then they will train you in the job role that you're recruited into. So it's really, really important to bear that in mind when you're looking at opportunities that are out there. Don't know if somebody's got a sound on. If you could mute your sound. Okay, so after this session, here's a really useful link to our Get Hired Resource Centre. So if you want to have a CV check, for example, if you go onto Get Hired Resource Centre, you'll find an automated CV tracking system, and that's useful to get some feedback on your CV in relation to things like the spelling and grammar, things like white space on your CV. Have you got appropriate sections? CV360 is used by a lot of employers, or a similar system, as a first filter when they advertise a role. Because in order to get through the number of applications, let's say if you've got 60 people apply, it's just a simple quick fix to get down to maybe 10 that you want to take forward. A word of caution with this system, it doesn't help you in terms of telling you whether your CV is tailored to a particular opportunity, or it can't comment on the nuance, so the language that you use in your CV, but it can tell you, as I say, it's useful if you've missed a section out, for example, or if you've got a lot of spelling or formatting errors, it will highlight those things for you, so it's worth doing. But there's other links on the Get Hired Resource Centre in all those sections there. You practice online interviews. So do go to online resources as a first port of call if you do want help with your applications, CVs, etc., practicing for interviews. Worth mentioning, there may be some of you who are thinking, well, I haven't got experience, I'm really worried. Interestingly enough, there's a lot more online internships coming about these days, as you would expect. So I've just put 2 or 3 there. The paid one, particularly relevant to international opportunities. So do have a hunt round for online internships. Again, a way to enhance your CV at the moment, because you're not going to be able to kind of get that face-to-face experience potentially for some time to come. But obviously do remember, if you are going for opportunities within things like more of the caring field, like social work, teaching, they will often be looking for a certain amount of face-to-face experience as well in order to consider your application. Finally, a call to action. The theme of today's event has been about clarity, and so we do hope that we've helped you to clarify where to look for graduate opportunities and what sort of opportunities exist. So a little call to action there, create an action plan for yourself. So it takes one small step to move in the right direction of where you want to be in your end goal. So please do think about setting up an action plan for yourself, and come along tomorrow. There are the links to the sessions tomorrow and on Friday. And finally, we do value your feedback. So if you have any comments in the chat function there, that would be great to put your comments there, what you thought of this session. And remember, you can actually contact us as well. So we have got online resources that I've highlighted, but if you do want to speak to a member of our team, then please contact us at Careers@Leeds Beckett and follow us on our social media, and we'd love to hear from you. So has anyone got any questions that they'd like to ask? Just going to look
either in the chat, or you could turn your audio on and ask. There's only a few of you, it's fine.
Yeah. We must have done such a good job, Georgina, that we've got no questions coming through. Okay, guys, well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And as I say, please get in touch with us at that email address if you do need any help going forward. And hope to see you at some of the sessions tomorrow or on Friday. So any feedback you can just pop in there whilst we're still online for the next minute or so. That would be great, please. Anything else you want to add, Georgina?
No, just, I mean, if anyone's got, because obviously what we've said is fairly general, because we didn't know who was going to sign up for this. So if you've got any specific questions you want to ask about your area, then, you know, you're very welcome to now. We've got a few minutes, it's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sana.
Anything we've not covered that you would have liked to have seen covered? About opportunities abroad. Okay, Grace, yeah. That's useful to know.
Yeah, so in terms of opportunities abroad, do you mean jobs in specific areas, or further study, or you're welcome to turn your audio on if you want, because I think you might be the only person left, so it's fine. I mean, maybe you can't turn your audio, but one really good place to look, okay, internships and jobs. I think if you take a look at a website called Target Jobs, they have a really good section on country profiles, and then within each of those areas it will tell you about visas, it will tell you about good places to look for jobs, internships, things like that. So obviously everything's very, you know, very changed in the last few months, so your you know, your options immediately might be quite restricted, but hopefully as time goes on there'll be more opportunities. But I would say Target Jobs is a really good place to start, and also I would be having a look on LinkedIn, maybe thinking about the places that you're interested in, and looking for jobs, and maybe looking for Leeds Beckett alumni in, say, for example, you wanted to go to Sydney in Australia, looking for people who were there and contacting them and asking them about jobs. That's one idea.
Yeah, there's also Rate My Placement. That's a really big website, and they have internships as well, don't they? So have a look at that, Grace, as well. Rate My Placement.
So those are probably two good starting places for getting some ideas and you know, finding out what the job situation's like in those countries. Okay.
Okay, great. Well,